Since last we talked, Musk has gotten the green light to buy Twitter. Now, it's important to note that until the ink's on the paper and the deal is signed and things are true, it might change, just being frank. In fact, they're already making it so that pretty much other people can still outbid Musk. If someone else wants to come in right now, if George Soros or Bill Gates or someone wants to join in, or they want to pull their money together and outbid Musk, they could potentially do it right now. It's not finalized, even though they have tentatively agreed on it. They have agreed to let the deal go through. But as this happens, the European Union has come out now, and they actually passed the bill we talked about last time, which is the Digital Services Act, which is going to create rules to regulate information online. And let me explain this. I'll start off with Reuters here. It says Musk gets Twitter for $44 billion to cheers and fears of free speech plan. Let me explain this. It says Elon Musk clinched a deal to buy Twitter Inc. for $44 billion cash on Monday in a transaction that will shift control of a social media platform populated by millions of users and global leaders to the world's richest person. Now, there's a few things Musk is talking about doing, which will be very interesting, just to kind of outline what he's talking about. Now, in terms of free speech, Musk is talking about basically restoring free speech to Twitter. And the way he's talking about doing this is within the boundaries of law, where legal speech should be allowed on an open platform. If you can legally say it, in other words, if it's not criminal, you can say it. And he's not going to be censoring people beyond the limits of legal speech. Sorry about that. One sec. He's not going to censor people beyond the limits of legal speech, which is going to get into some issues possibly with the European Union, which we'll describe in a bit. He's also talking about things like an edit button. He wants to make a program to verify human users to make sure they're not bots, which is actually pretty big. In fact, I do know of organizations that operate, for example, in Washington, including working with politicians, that run botnets online. And, they're used for like opposition. So, for example, you might have like 1,000 or even 100 Twitter bots that are just programmed to hurl insults at people. And, a politician or a company could pay money to these firms, where these firms then use that bot network to like insult someone or fill their direct messages with, hate mail or something like that. Like there's a business for that. It's a dirty business, but it exists. And so when he's talking about verifying human users, Musk is suggesting he wants to get rid of things like that, which would be very interesting. Keep in mind, too, that's not going to solve that issue. In China, for example, they have like the 50-cent army and also different influencers part of this, where the Chinese Communist Party gets actual humans to do things like that. And they pay them like 50 cents per post to go and argue on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party online. So there are these types of things, which is frankly why you won't see me getting involved in arguments online sometimes, is frankly because, a lot of it's fake, frankly. A lot of it's just, paid actors, Media Matters type stuff, right, like that. A lot of it's opposition, and frankly, a lot of the other stuff just people who, frankly, just follow one type of news outlet and never hear the other side of the aisle, and their worldview is limited. Let's put it that way, right? Musk is also talking about opening the source code of Twitter, which actually could have two sides to it. On one side, it makes it so that Twitter, for example, can't create algorithms, codes to censor certain speech without the public knowing about it. Open source on one side could be very beneficial in that regard. Open source on the other side could open it to a lot of cybersecurity issues and so on, and to possible foreign espionage. I do know the Chinese Communist Party manipulates open source code, for example, to allow for backdoors for example, to monitor platforms. Sorry, folks. As I was talking for a bit, it gets me. He's also talking about something very interesting. Right now, the business model of Twitter and frankly most social media is basically to collect data on you, right? Monitor you, look at see what you're looking at, and create advertiser profiles of you, which they can sell to companies. The business right? The business of these things, the product of social media is you. You are the product of social media. You are what's being sold, right? That is actually how the model works. Elon Musk is talking about changing that. Oh yeah, to Pink Patriot, you're asking oolong. Yeah, I'm drinking oolong tea today, Taiwanese oolong tea. But yeah, on that note, what Musk is talking about is changing the financial model, which would be significantly. This would be revolutionary. He wants to finance Twitter by basically making the blue check mark a sellable product, where people could buy, that type of verification, and so people would pay to be on there. And frankly, for businesses, for influencers, for authors, for a lot of the people who are like influencers on Twitter, anyways, because Twitter does have a lot of it's good for companies. I'm on Twitter. I post my videos there, so you folks know, when I'm launching an episode, for example. It does have a lot of interest for people, which people might pay for, while still using that model. He very likely keep it free for everybody else as well, aside from the people who want to pay for it. It's a very clever business model, but basically he's causing a lot of noise on this right now because he's saying basically he wants to end legal. He wants to end the censorship of legal speech. And it's starting a very interesting discussion, frankly, ironically, around what Twitter was already doing. You had like MSNBC come out and do this. They were doing this whole rant on, what if this could rig the elections? Using Twitter, you could, for example, silence one political party right before an election and choose who the winner is. Folks, they were doing that. Remember that Twitter was like banning the Trump team right before the elections. Twitter kicked Trump off Twitter when he was still president. On January 6th, they deleted Trump's tweets telling people to be peaceful and go home. Right? They were already doing that. The irony is that in their criticisms of what Musk could potentially do, they're actually exposing what they were already doing in favor of, frankly, one political party. It's bizarre, but you have some people who, I don't know, maybe they don't think fully, and they don't seem to see they don't see the hypocrisy in it. They don't see the caveats to it, Anyways, but as this happened, something else interesting happened, which right when Musk buys it, that Digital Services Act gets passed in Europe. Now, you might remember our last episode. I won't go over the whole thing again. If you want to learn about the Digital Services Act, watch the last episode because we did a whole big thing on it. But basically, Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, they both came out almost simultaneously, the same day, and started talking about the need to crack down on disinformation, the need to regulate information on the internet, how private platforms like, businesses need to begin censoring, essentially, in the interest of defending democracy. And what Hillary Clinton was directly pushing for was this Digital Services Act in Europe. And that led a lot of people to be like, well, what is this? Why is Hillary pushing for this bill in Europe? Well, now we may actually have the answer, because here we have an article. This is actually from them. It says, EU warns Elon Musk over Twitter moderation plans. It's Ars Technica. And it says, Brussels has warned Elon Musk that Twitter must comply with the EU's new digital rules, because, folks, that got passed. What we discussed last week has now been passed under his ownership, or risk hefty fines or even a ban from the European Union, setting the stage for a global regulatory battle over the future of the social media platform. Thierry Breton, the EU's commissioner for the internet market, told the Financial Times that Elon Musk must follow rules on moderating illegal and harmful content, not just illegal content, harmful content as they deem it, online after Twitter accepted the billionaire's $44 billion takeover. I won't go over the whole thing, but it says this a bit further in. Breton said he wanted to offer a reality check to Musk's plan for less stringent moderation. The European Union Commissioner, who was key in negotiating the new Digital Services Act, the one we were discussing, this is one of the main guys who was one of the key players in pushing that, warned that a lack of compliance from Twitter risked a ban from the platform in Europe. And he said this, Anyone who wants to benefit from this market will have to fulfill our rules. The board of Twitter will have to make sure that if it operates in Europe, it will have to fulfill the obligations, including moderation, open algorithms, freedom of speech, right? Freedom of speech, but with moderation and removing hate speech and harassment, whatever else they deem it as, right? Which are oftentimes loaded terms. Oftentimes loaded terms that don't mean what they say they mean. Freedom of speech, transparency in rules, obligations to comply with our own rules for hate speech, revenge porn, and harassment. So maybe we can't post the Hunter Biden laptop photos on there. In other words, we'll see how Musk plays this out. Musk responded to it and basically said that his interpretation of free speech is legal speech. So if things are illegal, he does plan to moderate it. In my opinion, Musk should say, well, if you want to ban us in Europe, then ban us in Europe, because I'm not going to censor on behalf of Europe. Because how many more times will America need to overthrow tyranny from Europe? We beat them in 1776. We beat them. We beat them in World War I. We beat them when they were the Nazis, and we beat them when they were the communists. Now we're going to beat them when they're the socialists. We will see. But Europe right now is trying to place its totalitarian rules once again on American soil. We'll see how Musk actually responds to that, and we'll see to what extent they do try to regulate speech. Because, again, they oftentimes use loaded terms. What would they define as harassment, for example? What do they define as hate speech, for example? And it goes beyond that to include any misinformation on COVID-19, as they claim. It includes misinformation and disinformation and propaganda, as they claim. And who regulates what is true and what is false? Does the European Union believe that they should be the sole regulatory body for determining what is true and what is false? For determining medically what information is accurate and what is not accurate? For determining what countries' propaganda or information is allowed and which one is not? Will they then ban all Chinese state-run media? Is that what that means? If so, then fantastic. Or does it mean, for example, they're going to be banning political candidates like maybe Trump coming back from having a political platform? We'll see how it plays out. But again, the European Union passed that act, and they're already trying to force it on the United States, as we discussed last week, on Sunday, and said that they probably would. So here we are, folks.